All right, so welcome to episode 5 of the Hong Kong Trail Walkers podcast. Today I have with me someone who is very, very, very accomplished. A runner. I'm going to read a list of his, I'm going to read out, some of his accomplishments. Here you go. These are 100-kilometer races, right? So Trans Lantau 100 in the 4th position. Hong Kong 100, 18th position. By the way, over 1,000 people participate. So 18th position is no joke. The North Face 100 Hong Kong, 3rd position. Lantau 70 solo, 4th position. Hong Kong 100, this is 2014, 34. Trans Lantau 100, 2014, number 3. So this guy has been in the top 10 or in the top 20 of major races in the past 2 years alone. Yeah, a list of in the past 2 years, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 18, 19 races, and I just discovered from him, right, that he's never ever DNF'd during a race either. So. Also, before I ask him to say hi, I want to add that not only is he accomplished, he's also one of the most humble people that I know. So once I sent him an email asking him to be on the show, he writes back going, "Hey Vince, there are better runners than me." I don't know. At the end of this podcast, you're going to realize that he's up there. He's in the top league. So welcome, John, to the show.
Oh, I thought you were talking about someone else. Oh, thanks. It's good to be here, Vince.
Excellent. So now, what I want to do as we start off, right? I want to tell you first of all that everyone that I've spoken to, they all wanted you on the show. So you've got a big fan following. Okay, yeah. And then one guy, Tony. Hi, Tony. By the way, shout out to you. Right?
Hi, Tony.
He wanted me to ask every guest on the show 3 questions. So I'm going to start off with your 3 questions. Yeah. So first of all, what's your favorite trail in Hong Kong and why?
I think in terms of my favourite trail, it just changes over time. At the moment, I'm really liking going up and down Tai Mo Shan. So we start at the kiosk at the Rotary Park and we go up Tai Mo Shan down to Lead Mine and then we go back and do that as many times as we can. The reason I'm liking that is it's always about 5 degrees cooler in summer. You don't get spiders, so it's great for night runs. And then you've got the kiosk, so you can always keep refueling. So it's a really good training run for UTMB and UTMF that I'm doing later in the year. So at the moment, that's my favourite trail.
So we're talking about the road that goes up, stage 8.
Yep.
Yeah?
And then down to Lead Mine on the stairs in the trail.
Excellent. Now, second question for you, right? So what do you think is your best accomplishment in the field of trail running?
It's a tough one. I think to be honest, it's probably not the races where I've done well. It's not the wins or the podiums. It's actually probably the hard races. It's the ones where you've had to dig really deep, really discover a lot about yourself, and hopefully come through. And I think the one that really comes to mind is probably UTMF, where I got to the ninth and final checkpoint. I was just broken. I didn't want to run anymore. I was ready to give up, and I just had an impromptu cry at the last checkpoint for about 10 minutes, and I think just being able to get through that and still get to the finish line is something I think I'm pretty proud of.
We spoke about this offline, but can you tell us again? Yeah, so why were you crying when you reached the 9th checkpoint?
Even with the benefit of hindsight, I still don't know. I'd been feeling bad for about 2 or 3 hours. I was pushing hard. I was having a pretty good race, but there was a lot of hurt there. And I think I got to the checkpoint. I felt kind of normal, but then saw my girlfriend, a couple of friends who were supporting as well, and just broke down into tears. I think it was just the combination of just everything in the race. And I think anyone who's ever done one of these ultras just realises they can be pretty emotional experiences.
What kilometre were you on when you started crying?
I think it was probably about 140 Ks.
Okay, and what made you continue despite that?
Probably one of the things that one of my good friends, Andrew Dawson, told me is if you ever pull out of a race, then you've got to come back the next year. You've got to actually start from the start. You've got to get all the way to where you're going to pull out, and then you've still got to finish it. So given that you've already done that much, you might as well finish it.
So you thought of Dawson at that moment and decided to continue running?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I don't think of Dawson all the time when I get emotional, but that particular time, it was a good quote to think of, and it helped me give me the motivation to keep going.
I'm glad you don't think of Dawson all the time.
95%. But there are other times that I don't.
Okay, so John, tell us, who are your role models in the field of trail running?
I think probably my biggest role model is Stone, and I think I'm probably in good company with a lot of people in Hong Kong here. He's always been a hero for me, just for his running performances. But the first time that I met him as well, I've got to admit I was pretty nervous when I met him, because I think like a lot of people, he's a bit of a hero. He's a legend on the Hong Kong trail running scene. But I was so nervous when I went up to talk to him for the first time, and he was just so nice and so humble, and he wanted to know about me. And I think a person who's that good a runner at the same time is such a good human being is just you can't help but respect someone like that.
I think you can look into the mirror as well, and then you'd see the same person.
No, Stone's something else.
When did you first meet Stone? What year was this?
I was probably about 3 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So tell us, right? Your humble beginnings. So how did you start? How did you get into trail running, and where did this passion for running originate?
So for me, trail running didn't really start in earnest until I got to Hong Kong. Before that, I was more of a road runner. But to take it all back, when I was little, I did little athletics, and I wasn't very good at sprinting, and so I generally tended towards the longer distance events, and that came through in high school. And when I was in Sydney, I did a few marathons. I was more of a 3:30, 3:45 type marathoner. And then I found I enjoyed it. I liked the challenge. I sort of kept pushing. It was really only when I got to Hong Kong that I really started to really get into the trails. I tried to be a road runner here, but it was hard, and the trails are just so easy. They're so magnificent, and such a great escape from just Hong Kong's bustling life. So I got into them really easily. I love them, and I think when you love something, you practice a lot. You've got a lot of passion for it. It just it helps, and you do more of it, and you get better.
So this was 2010 again, right?
Yep. So 2010 I got here.
Could you tell us your improvement from 2010 up until 2015, right? So I mean, how did you progress in the races, and what about your physique as such? Did you lose weight? Did you become a better runner? Oh, you did, obviously, but how did you go about achieving that in those 5 years?
Okay, gotcha. I mean, when I first got here, I did a few races in the first season I was here, a few of the King of the Hills. There weren't a lot of 100Ks back in 2010. I mean, in fact, Hong Kong 100, that was their first year, and that was the first solo 100K in Hong Kong. I think that year I came 8th because there weren't that many people running it, in about maybe 13, 40, 45. Since then I've managed to do about 12:01. It would have been nice to do a minute quicker, but there we are. So there's been a bit of improvement over the last 5 years. I think a big chunk of that's been just getting fitter. I run more these days than I did when I got here. I think a part of it's knowing the trails a lot better, knowing when you can push, when you have to sort of pull back a little bit. I think there's a lot of technique both going up and especially down. You see a lot of the elites when they come to Hong Kong, they really struggle with the stairs and the downhills, and that's something I've gotten a lot better at. And I think the biggest thing, especially in the last 12, 18 months, has actually just been losing a lot of weight.
Tell us about that. Just what did you weigh before? What do you weigh now?
I think maybe 12 months ago I was probably around 71 kilos, and I've got that down to about 62, 63. I've put a little bit of weight on in the off season at the moment, but it's sort of 8 or 9 kilos there, which is what a lot of the Four Deserts people will carry for 250 Ks with all of their gear. And so if you think you can run without one of those or with one of those, you can see that you're going to be a lot faster without. And a lot of that was just, unfortunately, it was a lot of hard work for me in terms of just counting calories. The output in terms of exercise hasn't changed that much, but it's just been eating better food. And actually, for the last 2.5 weeks, I've been off the alcohol as well.
Tell us about that experience. How long do you intend to be off alcohol for?
Well, the plan at the moment, and I've taken a little bit of, I guess, inspiration from Milos, actually. He's off alcohol until I think he's doing CCC. Or is he doing TDS?
He's doing TDS.
TDS. So he's off alcohol until TDS, and so I thought if he can do that, I can do that for UTMB and UTMF. So the idea is no drinking until that finish line, hopefully at UTMF, and then it'll probably be 17 beers in an hour.
Do you think Andrew Dawson's going to be proud of you for that, for taking on that task?
Probably not, but I think he's probably drinking enough wine for us at the moment down in Margaret River. He says he's studying wine, but I don't quite believe it.
Neither do I, and I think he often gets lost even when he's in Australia.
Absolutely.
So tell us, you've obviously become a trail runner now, right? So do you still like your road runs? Do you still do your road runs? And if you had a choice, would you only do trail runs now?
Actually, I still find it useful to do a few road runs. There's the Avoc 5K series and the Reservoir series at the start of the trail running season. And I find they're good just to try and get back into that sort of racing mindset again. I always like to do at least 1 or 2 marathons during the trail running season. I just find it's just a really good speed endurance workout that you never really get on the trails. With trails, we'll get it to a hill and it's a good excuse to slow down for a little bit. We can walk up, you get your breath back. But, a marathon is really just that, red line intensity for 3 hours, and I think it really helps in terms of your speed fitness for trails.
Stu, I wanted to tell you about John's result here. Right? Standard Chartered Marathon 2014, 2 hours and 57 minutes. Congratulations, that's awesome.
Thank you. But having said that, there's actually quite a few good trail runners who, have got some great times in in the Standard Chartered. There's guys like Ying, regularly does pretty well. I guess call out to Giuseppe, who did 2:59.59 last year, 59, yeah. Which is just magnificent pacing.
Not to forget his green power. Right? I think he did something like, what did he do this year? I think he did sub 4.
Did 4:09 or it was a magnificent time.
Okay, so tell us about your training program, right? So what do you do? So do you have a structured training routine, and what exactly do you follow every day to get to this level of fitness?
To be honest, it's not the best. I don't really have much of a routine when it comes down to it. I think generally I like to do at least one long run per week, and that just depends on injuries and time and other things that are happening. I don't do a lot of speed work, which I probably should. Whenever I found that I've done speed work, and especially strength work and stretching, I find I run a lot better. And actually, probably the best time, or my best fitness this year was actually when I was actually injured. I couldn't do that much running, but I was doing a lot of strength work, a lot of flexibility and stretching in the gym. And that actually coincided when I was running better. So it's a bit haphazard, but probably needs to be a bit more structured, including the gym stuff.
So on average, how many kilometers do you do a week?
Looking at Strava, it averages out to about 55 Ks a week.
And how does it break down usually? Is the vast majority of that on a Saturday?
Yeah, a lot of that will be on the weekends. I don't get a lot of time during the week, so I might manage 10 or 15 Ks during the week, and then the rest will be on the weekends.
And has it been this way from 2010, or did it change?
It's pretty much been that. I guess the one caveat to that is, especially during the racing season, a lot of those are race Ks. So it's probably not a lot of Ks when you compare it to some other people who are training out there, but the intensity is generally pretty high.
Right. So to get to, say, when you did the Hong Kong 100 in 2010 or 11, right, you did 13 hours and 40 minutes, and now you did it last year in 12 hours, right? So that difference came from just a 55-kilometer weekly mileage every week continuously for 5 years. Is that right?
I think a lot of it was probably losing the weight, and then a lot of it as well was actually just getting better at 100Ks. These days we're spoilt for choice with 100K races, and so you just get better at just pacing yourself, at nutrition and hydration and listening to the signs, and fixing yourself before your body goes down a one-way track to oblivion. So you get better at a lot of that stuff, and I think that's really helped.
Excellent. So tell us, right, injuries. Have you been injured a lot, and how have you dealt with them? I do know you told me beforehand that you've never DNF'd at all, right? So despite physical injuries, how do you tell yourself to continue?
Yeah, so actually the last 12 months have probably been a lot more injuries than I would have hoped, and I just race too much. At the end of the day, you hear about there's elite marathoners, and they're obviously in a completely different world to the rest of us mere mortals. But those guys will pick 1 or 2 marathons a year, and they'll really focus on that. There's a lot of training that goes around that. And I think about what a lot of the trail runners do in Hong Kong, and it's not unusual for us to be doing 20, 25 ultra trails every year, and a lot of that's crammed into 6 or 7 months. I look at guys like Alan Ng, who pretty much did every race in the trail running season, doesn't get injured, and I've got to take my hats off to guys like that. I tried to do that, and my body just breaks down after a while. I think for me it's a lot of tendon injuries, which at the end of the day comes down to just my muscles not being strong enough to support the tendons. So I know what I need to do, but I guess I've got an issue because I've only got limited time. If I've got an hour to do whatever I want, I can go to the gym and I can do some strength work, which I need to do, or I can go for a run. The run wins every time. So I've had a lot of injuries. I probably know what I need to do, but I'm probably not as disciplined as I need to be. And then to answer your other question about what to do in races, I think this is the part where you've got the disclaimer where you tell the kids to not do what I do, but I'm just stubborn, and if I've entered a race, I want to finish it. And so I've been in races where I've injured myself, and the right thing to do would have been to stop. But I kind of push on. You do pay for it because it's a longer recovery period afterwards. And I've had times this last season where I've been out for 3 or 4 weeks. But that's, I guess, who I am, and I quite like the fact I haven't DNF'd. And I think as long as I don't DNF once, it's a lot easier to not DNF a second time.
It's very inspirational. So tell us on that subject. Tell us about the Ultra 168, not the Umbrella Run. Sorry, the Umbrella Run. So you did the Umbrella Run, and then you did the Lantau 70 the same weekend. So Lantau 70 is obviously 70 kilometers long, and it's a pretty hard course. And the how long was the other one? What was 158? Yeah.
115.
115 kilometers. How did you do that in 1 week?
Yeah, so it was tough, and actually, just to make it harder, we had the MSIG Hong Kong on the Sunday. So that was 50 Ks, then the Umbrella Ultra 115 Ks on the Wednesday, and then the Lantau 70 Ks on the Saturday. And to be honest, by the time the Lantau 70 rolled around, I had a bit of an overuse injury, just in my anterior tibula, just basically it's at the front of my shin on one side, which basically just meant that lifting my foot up was just quite painful. I don't recommend this to people, but took an ibuprofen at the start of the race. Went out nice and slow just to see how it was, and actually felt okay. But it came back after about 15 k's, and it hurt a lot. And I think in those situations, I just tell myself that I'm here. I want a challenge. And I think when I look back on my races, the ones that I'm the most proud of are the hardest challenges. So I think you just embrace the challenge. Part of that's just embracing the hurt and just getting through it.
In terms of physical pain, right? What's been the most painful race for you?
It's probably been maybe the North Face this last season. I had just an issue with my metatarsals, just the base of my foot around the ball, just being extremely sore. And I think this can be quite common for people, especially when you don't have enough padding in your shoes. And I'd love to wear Hokas, but I've got a really weak left ankle and I go over them a lot. So they're good for some people, but they're not good for me. But just probably for the last 50 k's, the base of my feet, every time that I stepped down, just hurt. And occasionally you'd step on something sharp and it would just send pain all through your body. And it was really, really difficult. But you just push on. You keep telling yourself little things like pain is weakness of the body. You tell yourself that everyone else is going through similar things as well. You're just going through something different, and you push on and you make it work.
Do you have a ready-made speech that you tell yourself when you're in that much pain?
Yeah, there's a few things. I used to do this fitness boot camp in Sydney where we had a guy called the Warrior, and he had all of these things. He used to love to tell us the pain is just weakness leaving the body, that sweat is fat crying, all those sorts of things as well. And I tell themselves, he had another one which was pain is temporary, glory is forever.
That's a good one. Tell us about the tornado as well. Yeah, how painful was that? That was 3 years back, correct?
So that was 3 years back, and that was the first close to 100 miler that I did. I did that with Andrew Dawson as well, and it was a really tough race. In fact, I remember seeing you there as well. I think you passed us at stage 3 on the way out, and it was a really hot day. We went out way too fast. I remember looking at my heart rate; it was 150 for the first 2 hours, and I paid for it. We got to halfway. We were okay. We were in decent shape, and on the way back, we got to Leadmine. It was 3 a.m. Andrew and I both retired to the toilets. We locked ourselves in the cubicle, and I think we were both in the mindset where we're both pretty stubborn. If he said, "Let's," do you feel like quitting now? I would have said yes, but I didn't want to be the one that said, "Let's quit," and he was in exactly the same way. And so we both basically just quietly passed out in the toilets. I think we probably would have been there for and probably for the next day, except Andre, who'd actually volunteered to be our impromptu support, just came. I don't know how he knew, but he came just racing up to Leadmine from Taipo with his inimitable cowbell ringing, and woke both of us up, kicked us into gear, and got us going. And we wouldn't have finished that without Andre. And I'm still really thankful for him. I think if anyone ever needs crew for an ultra, this guy is the godfather of Hong Kong ultra running. He's done more ultras than any of us. He's done longer ultras. He just knows exactly what to do, how to motivate people, what to give them, just exactly what to do. And he just got us through that. It was bloody tough, but really rewarding. And thank you to Andre.
He's also the guy who my teammate Vic. He completed the 4 trails, and had it not been for Andre's support, I don't think Vic would have completed either. He's the kind of guy who pushes you to complete something.
And in fact, look, I'm still blown away with Vic's effort there. I mean, to do 2 overnights in a row and to do it's effectively 300 kilometres without stopping with whatever it is, 14 k's of climbing is just ridiculous. But I remember talking to Jag, who did it this year, and one of the reasons he didn't finish was because he just didn't want to have Andre telling him to keep going.
That's hilarious. That day, by the way, when Vic did the 4 trails, Dom did something like 130 kilometers as well.
Yeah, I think he did the first half of it, so I think he did the first half, and then he ducked out for Hong Kong Trail, and then he ended up doing Lantau Trail with Vic as well. So he ended up doing 240 k's anyway.
Exactly. So there was this point where we were on Xingmen, and then Vic wanted to make sure Dom was going to be with him, and I was there too. So Martin gave me a call. He told me that HKTR needs you. Yeah. So I went to Taipo. I started running with those guys.
Did you have your cape on?
I did, yeah. It didn't last too long though. So once I reached, Vic wanted to make sure Dom was going to continue pushing Xingmen. Dom secretly told me that he wasn't going to continue, and then after we crossed Xingmen, Vic was assuming that Dom was behind, whereas Dom was never there. And he managed to continue all the way to Wilson, and then Dom rejoined us, I think, on the Hong Kong Trail.
Okay, yep, gotcha. Yeah, amazing stuff.
So tell us, John, how competitive are you?
I think I'm pretty competitive. I've run a few races as training runs, but to be honest, there's always something inside of me that just, that wants to push, that wants to, just to see how fast you can go, wants to compete. And, I just, when you're running well and you're running fast, I mean, that feeling that you get when it's not effortless, but, you feel like you're really going, you can feel the wind blowing through your hair and, everything just flows well. It's just one of the best feelings in life.
But do you compete against yourself, or is there someone secret out there that you want to beat?
Well, it was Dawson when he was here. But no, look, at the end of the day, I'm just competing against myself. And a lot of times when I do a race, I don't really have a time in mind. I think at the end of the race, it's just hard because every race is different. Even if it's the same course, there's going to be different conditions. Your body's in different shape. You approach it differently. Maybe the lead-up was different. Your nutrition was different. The weather, the heat, whatever. There's just so many factors. So I think for me, I just like to feel I got to the end of the race and, I'm proud of whatever I did. And so a lot of that's just, seeing how I responded to the challenge and whether I, did the best that I could do on the day.
But do you want to improve every single year, or are you okay taking a year off and going easy on the runs?
I mean, a lot of the going easy is probably during summer, and so there's often been this cycle for me. You go really hard during the racing season, and then you take 5 months off during winter, and that's been the break for me. But when the racing season's on, I just love to race and just push myself as much as I can. So that's what I do. But unfortunately, this summer, there's a couple of big races to train for, so that cycle's blown apart, and unfortunately, we've got to run hard during summer as well.
Well, wish you the best with that too.
I wish me the best too.
All right, so tell us about your philosophy, right? Team runs versus individual runs. Yeah, do you like races like the Trail Walker where you have to run with 3 other guys, or do you prefer to run by yourself?
Actually, I really like the team runs, and I really like team training as well. It's funny, I like to go running with people, and I guess people that I've never trained with before are always really scared and say, look, let's not go for a training run. You're just going to be too fast. But actually, I really enjoy just going out there and having a chat and getting to know someone over 2 or 3 hours, and it's just a great fun thing to do. But I love the team runs as well because there's a different dynamic. At the end of the day, with a team run, you're as slow as your slowest person. So it's really the whole team focusing on whoever is going to be the slowest person at the time, and just really trying to help get them through, and just working as a team. Because I've seen so many situations where a team, it's a group of individuals as opposed to being a team. When you have that, people are running off at the start, they're blowing up the people, the slower people, and that never gets a good result. So I love the dynamic of a team race, and I'm really looking forward to doing Trail Walker with Marie, Matt, and Mark. Big call out to you guys this year, and I think hopefully we're going to have a pretty good race.
Are you going to miss Dawson?
I'm going to miss Dawson. I think everyone's going to miss Dawson. My ears have stopped ringing about 6 months after he left these sunny shores. But look, I've done a couple of. I've actually done a trail walk with Dawson. I supported him last year. Unfortunately, I was a bit injured, so I couldn't run. And look, he's always a barrel of laughs. I mean, he doesn't shut up for 14 hours. It's it's endearing. There's times during a trail walker when I guess it's less endearing, maybe for the teams in front of us and behind us as well. But no, look, I think every time I do a trail walker and he's not there, it's there's going to be a little bit of sadness.
Right. So I'll have right. So I think a year back, I think this was 2014. Yeah, you were not. Yeah. You were injured. You were not able to do the trail walker. So I was running with Dawson, and then he told me that he, fortunately for him, he found someone who was quote unquote an upgrade to having you for company, and that guy was Matt Morrow's. He said, John's not here, but that's certainly an upgrade in terms of company.
Yeah, well, the year before, I think the year before was when the villagers had that protest at Checkpoint 1, and I didn't bring any water for the first stage, and I effectively ran the first 20 Ks without water, and I paid for it for the rest of the day. I ran with Dweefer, with Sam Guinness, with Andrew, and I've got to admit, I was the slowest person all day. I was dehydrated from the start, and they just dragged me along, and I was in my little shell of misery, trailing away 50 metres behind everyone for the whole day, and it was a tough day, and I was probably a misery guts. I completely understand why Andrew would say that.
All right, so let's switch now to the mental side of things, right? So what's your philosophy on pain as such, right? Are you the kind of guy who would override pain using your mental powers, or are you the kind of guy who still believes in having painkillers? What's your philosophy on that?
I mean, I think for me, look, I do take ibuprofens. I try not to take too many of them, and I've got a rule that if I'm going to take them, I'm not going to take them in the first half of the race. It's mostly a rule. Just, I think if something's hurting in the first half when it shouldn't be hurting, and then you're going to try and finish the race, I think you probably don't want to put yourself in that situation, but generally in the second half of the race, it's mostly little niggles, it's the tiredness, and I think it's probably got a place there. So for me, ibuprofen's, I think can have a place for certain runners. I think like most things, you don't want to try things for the first time on race day, and at the same time, you really need to be careful about how many you're taking, because it does actually put a bit of stress on your on your liver as well, and your kidneys, which obviously under a lot of stress when you're racing anyway.
So, assuming you're doing a 100-kilometer race and you're feeling totally crap at the 60th kilometer and you can't even run, right? Would you rather walk and complete the 40 kilometers, or would you take some painkillers and try to jog and complete the 40 kilometers?
I think if I was feeling that bad, I'd probably try with the ibuprofen and see how that went, and then just go from there. Sometimes if you're in a race and you've tried everything else and you have to walk, well, then you have to walk.
But you would finish no matter what.
Hopefully, yeah. Fingers, I'm sort of touching lots of wood right now.
Well, now, I also know, right, that you did a couple of loop races, right, around Hong Kong and one in Japan as well?
Yeah, I think Natalia Watkins likes to, well, actually, is it Matt Moroz or Natalia Watkins likes to call them the hamster wheel races?
Hamster wheel races, yeah. Tell us about that. Yeah, what did that feel like?
So these are races basically where there's a course. It's usually a short course. It can be a 400-meter athletics track, it can be a 500-meter trail loop or whatever. And basically the idea is to see how many loops you can do in a certain amount of time. So it might be 6 hours, 12 hours, or 24 hours. I've done 2, which begs the question of why I went back and did a second one. But the first one I did, Matt Moroz, he's got a way with words. You've got to watch that guy. He's got a silver tongue. But convinced me to fly all the way down to Brisbane. I couldn't get a direct flight, and so he even convinced me to take an indirect flight via Malaysian Airlines, and this was when all of their planes were going missing. So I did all of that, went down there, and we basically just ran around and did this 500-meter loop to see how many we could do in 24 hours. And as it turned out, I think I did 415 loops.
What's that in total in kilometers again?
It's about 208 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
And it was hard. The one thing I've learned is that you might be fit, but you can't necessarily translate that fitness from trails to one of these races, because these are they're monotonous, consistent, straight, flat running, which, it turns out my muscles weren't quite used to. And every time I've done one of these races, I've actually gone away with, some sort of overuse injury, which usually hits me after about 14 or 15 hours, and then the last 10 hours are just, agony. But, I've done a couple. There was the one in Hong Kong as well, which was basically as many loops as you could do of this 1 kilometre straight over at Sha Tin Promenade on pavement, which was really, really tough. But done a couple of those. I think life's about trying new things and seeing if you like them. I'm proud to say that I'm not going to be doing any more. Sorry, Matt. Well, I'm not going to be doing any more until Matt next gets in my ear. But maybe one day something like Suchow or something like those. But I've got a lot of work to do if I ever want to get into something like that.
How did you do on the one in Hong Kong?
Not that well. I think I went out nice and slow, and I think got to about 15-16 hours, and it was actually got into a good position by then. But it got to about 4 or 5 in the morning. It was cold, it was raining, and I was just really tired. And I think at the end of the day, when I look back on that race, I went into it not wanting it enough. I think mentally I was pretty tired. We'd raced so many times already in the season, and it got to 4 or 5 in the morning. I was tired. The hard thing about these races as well is every kilometre you've got a nice comfy chair just sitting at you looking, saying, come here, just it's okay, 2 minutes, it's going to be fine. Natalia's got this saying, beware the chair. And that day I didn't beware the chair, and I sat down, and 3 hours later I got up, and the race was over. I went out and did a few more laps, but it's hard to come back from that. So it was a disappointing race, but you learn from these things, and hopefully you improve.
Would you say those races are mentally more tough than physically?
Yeah, absolutely, they're mentally, because when you're doing an A to B trail race, you get to see some amazing sights. It's new, it's different. There's always a different dynamic to the race. You're going up or down. There's different people. These races, it's just monotony. It really is a hamster wheel. You're putting in all this effort. You're not going anywhere. It's completely mental.
Very impressive, I got to say. Now, tell us about your gear strategy, right? So, a hot day. What kind of gear would you normally wear for a race?
I've got to admit, I'm probably pretty minimalist when it comes to gear. I love that feeling of just being free and just being able to run, as fast as I can and not being weighed down. So, if I can get away with that, get away legally with not having to wear a backpack, then I will. I've got some good shorts which I like, which have a lot of pockets, and I can get the mandatory gear in there. Or for a training run, obviously you don't need that. And so, I love to run, some people may have noticed, without a top, because I just love that feeling of just air sort of running through, and just feels like it cools me down. But I love to be minimalist, so I've got sort of small backpacks that I'll wear when I need to, pocket shorts. I've got sort of minimalist shoes, which I like as well, and just trying to keep it as easy and as light as possible.
Do you have a specific brand that you always use for shoes or a bag, or? No?
Yeah, at the moment, my race shoes are Salomon Sense Ultra 4s. I thought they were a big. They're just a little bit more cushioning than the old ones. They're not for everyone because they're a fairly minimalist shoe, and your feet do get beat up after about 50 k's. In terms of backpacks, the Ultimate Directions AK and also the Salomon Sense Ultra, I found are pretty good race packs. What else? And just in terms of shorts, Asics make a really good pair of pocket shorts, and I think Salomon sort of make one as well, which they both have really good shorts, and you can stick a stack in them without bouncing too much.
When you do these long races, do you normally get any stomach upsets at all, or not?
Sometimes, and usually it's when the race it's a hot day out, and I think in those days I actually find I try and overdrink to try and cool myself down, and I just end up getting a little bit bloated. But generally it's not the food that does it. I've got to the point now where I actually get through races pretty much on liquids, and I think that really helps.
What kind of liquid do you consume then?
Basically, I used to use sort of Perpetuum, and I found that was good. These days I'm racing on Tailwind, and I basically find, I've done a lot of study into this as well, and generally your body, when you're pushing pretty hard, can only take maybe 250 calories per hour in anyway. So if you can get that from like some sort of sports drink or endurance fuel, I think that's kind of perfect. Personally, I'll still top that up with gels. I like to get a bit of a caffeine hit sometimes when you're about to hit a big hill, or when you want to push a little bit harder. So I find it's useful to have a little bit of that as well.
Okay, now going back to the subject of you're not wearing shirts, right? So I mean, I did the TNF last year. It was freezing on top of Taimou Shan. Yeah, you obviously finished many hours before me, and I heard that you were not wearing a shirt, even though it was like a degree or 2 degrees on top of Taimou Shan. Yeah, now you can tell us, in all honesty, did you not wear shirts to attract girls, or is there a different reason?
I'm sort of a little bit worried that maybe I should put a top on if I want to attract the girls. Maybe it's scaring them away. But no, seriously, I like this. I like running tops off. It's just, Matt Moroz, he likes to call it the tap saf, and he coined the phrase, and I think he's the original tap saf runner. But for me, it just cools me down. And the North Face thing was actually a spur of the moment. I was intending to race with a backpack and a top, but got to race day and I felt it was cool. I felt really good. I felt light, and I had to go at just putting everything into my shorts, and it all fit. So I thought, we'll try that. And to be honest, if you're moving quick enough, you actually don't get cold. There wasn't a time during that race where I felt cold. But I completely understand. If the race went badly and I had to walk for bits, then I was going to pay the price.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about your special accomplishments, right? So last year you did the umbrella run, yeah? Did you do that for the run, or did you believe in the cause massively enough for you to do the run? What motivated you?
For me, it was the cause. I've sort of followed it. My girlfriend's been very active. She really believes in it, and I think for me, I'm a big believer in democracy, and it's. I think when you do have that accountability with government, I think it generally creates a fairer and more just society. It was something that was promised to the Hong Kong people, but it was just an idea that Dawson and I came up with as a way to show our support for it. It was something where we could combine something that we love doing, which was running, with a way of showing our support. And the idea basically came from just, I'd seen, I think I'd read an article where, this girl had basically drawn a few penises with her GPS watch. And she drew them well. The balls were drawn well. There was good hair on them as well, and it was really well done. And just got the idea that we could draw an umbrella with this as well. And we had to go at doing a map, and it seemed to work. And 3 days later, we were running at this thing.
So was it you who translated that drawing into an umbrella one, or was it Dawson who came up with that idea?
Look, I came up with the idea. Yeah. We came up with the umbrella route ourselves. We basically did it on a map, and you think everything's going to be okay, but when you draw things on a map, sometimes you don't really realise there's a big cliff here, or there's a really big steep downhill, or there's no trail. So, when we mapped it out, it was 102 k's, but on the day it was 115 because there were a lot of detours that we didn't, quite expect. But it still went really well, and we were happy with how the umbrella looked, and actually more importantly, just that groundswell of support from a lot of the runners, a lot of the trail runners who wanted to show their support as well on the day was just unbelievable.
Excellent. Now tell us about your goals for 2015. Well, what are the top 3 goals?
I think in terms of goals, Look, from a personal perspective, I think I'd love to have great races at a UTMF and UTMB. So they're coming up in 2 or 3 months, and to be honest, I'm starting to get pretty scared with both of them. I've done a couple of 100 miles, and they both broke me and hurt me in ways you can't believe. So I'm scared but excited about both of those. And I'd love to do well, because I think in a lot of ways they're the races where people go to really challenge themselves. So I think that from a personal point of view, that's where I'd love to be. And I think probably from a team point of view, the Hong Kong Trail Racing League's happening again, and I'm involved with a great team with Gone Running and Joint Dynamics, and we had a great team dynamic last year, and we've got a couple of teams this year, and I'd love the team to do really well. I love the runners that I'm running with. They're all training really hard, and I'd love for all of us to have great seasons coming up.
Excellent. Now tell us, right? In terms of someone who views you as a role model, someone who wants to become a John Ellis, and right now is a couple of levels below, what advice would you give this person?
I guess it's flattering to say that. I think for people just starting out, maybe don't do too much too soon. Really build up slowly, and just start with your 5K race and your 10K race, a few 10K races, get comfortable with that, and build up slowly. You really don't want to be cranking it up too much in terms of the distance and the difficulty, because you'll get injured like that. And I think one of the other things to do is find some running buddies, because I think you can bounce that passion and motivation. You can bounce off each other. It keeps you honest in a lot of ways. It gets you out running. I think if you want to improve, you've got to get out there, and anything that helps to get you out there in terms of your friends who are going to motivate you and push you, I think that's important too.
Excellent. Now tell us about Gone Running. Who came up with the idea, and what's the club about, and what is your online store about?
Look, it's something that we set up 6 months ago, and there's a few of us involved. We've got Matt, Jojo, Dennis, Steve. Look, we're all sort of involved in working on this, and the idea was basically, I guess we'd all had a few bad experiences within running stores or outdoor stores within Hong Kong. And we thought it could be done better. Having said that, there's still some really good stores out there, and big plug to Lantau Base Camp. I really love those guys. They love the trails. They know what they're talking about. But at the same time, there's other stores where you go in, and you ask someone, what's the drop on these shoes, and they good for trail running. What's the drop? Good for trail running. So we thought it could be done better, and so that was the idea. It's an online trail running store. Where we're just trying to give knowledgeable advice, or where people ask about the products, and we can tell them where it's going to be useful, what are the good things or bad things, is it for certain people. We try and stock good brands and new brands that we've brought to Hong Kong, things like Gurney Glue, Tailwind, and a few others that we've got planned as well, and also just good customer service in terms of getting it out there, and decent prices as well.
So before we wind up, do you have any parting words of wisdom for our listeners? Some sort of a philosophy you live life by, some sort of a mantra.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, life's just really about loving what you're doing. Do what you love, and I think the rest will flow. If you do things that you love, you're going to put your heart into them. You'll be good at them. People will respond to that, and I think that sort of helps to make you successful and happy, and I think makes the people around you successful and happy as well. So just do what you love.
Excellent. If someone wants to reach you or has more questions for you, can they do so, and if so, how?
Look, feel free. Look, I'm always happy to help people out with any questions. There's no question, big or small. Running, whatever. I don't pretend to be a fount of knowledge on everything. And in fact, I'm probably going to give you some bad advice on other things. But if you do, and you insist, my email is john@gonerunning.hk.
That's john@gonerunning.hk. I'm going to link that to the show notes as well.
Okay, brilliant.
John, thanks so much. Very inspirational. I've learned a lot from you too, and I wish you the best, and I hope you go kick some ass in UTMF and in UTMB. I want to see your name in the top 10.
Cheers. Well, I don't think we're going to be top 10, but look, I mean, it's been a privilege to be here, Vince, and I've got a lot of respect for your running as well, and I want to see you out on the trails, and sort of we'll be out there together next season.
Thanks very much. This is episode 5 of the Hong Kong Trail Rockers podcast. This is Vince signing off. Thanks.